One of the most crucial topics we've studied throughout this year is how Donald Trump's America First policy is a backlash on our global community and is also a factor in affecting our power, sovereignty, and international relations. Unlike previous presidents, Donald Trump's vision for the United States foreign policy is crystal clear and summed up into two words: America First. During his first day in the Oval Office, he abandoned the TPP trade deal. The TPP was designed to deepen economic ties between member countries as well as lower tariffs. Trump declared this withdrawal was in pursuit of his America First agenda. Not only did Trump withdraw from the TPP, but he also withdrew America from the Paris Climate Accord, which was an agreement designed to bind the world community into battling rising temperatures. Our withdrawal from this global agreement to focus on America First has not only weakened the global efforts to combat global warming, but also expresses an isolationist standpoint for the United States. The issues regarding his America First policies play an effect of the core unit into power, sovereignty, and international relations through many ways. Although his America First policy might be beneficial in the short term, his policies have costed the United States' place as a world superpower. When the United States withdrew from these deals with other countries, competing countries such as China have a greater opportunity to step up and take advantage of the United States' isolation when it comes to making agreements in trade. The concept of sovereignty is a concept that lays in the heart of Trump's America First policy. Trump is trying to defend the sovereignty of the United States through many of his policies that put America first. He wants to induce our sovereignty in the sense of making America first, meaning to take care of our own citizens before investing into other trade deals and countries. Whether this is a good thing or not, it rises the reputation of being an isolationist country to outside nations. Trump's America First policy may also unquestionably affect the international relations we share within the global community. When we move to an isolationist stance in the globalized world, we reputize ourselves as not only an America First country, but an American-only country. We reflect that we want to stand alone from international engagements. This inhibits other countries from having an incentive to wanting to work with us. When it comes to multilateral agreements that the United States does not have involvement in, we would be a lone actor in many global issues. Overall, instead of America First, we have seen a greater outcome of America Alone, where we are now standing on many global issues by ourselves, and it has brought a clear reduction of the United States' power and also an opportunity for U.S. adversaries such as China and Russia to rise up. Since 2013, refugees have traveled from countries such as Afghanistan and Iran to come seek asylum in nearby countries such as Australia. However, Australia has sent a significant amount of these refugees offshore processing centers in Papua New Guinea and Nauru due to several of their policies. A high majority of male refugees have been sent to the Manus Islands, while women and children have been transferred to Nauru. In total, there are over 3,500 asylum seekers on both places, and many of these people have been placed for over 4 years. While this may seem okay, Australia's policy of transferring asylum seekers and refugees is harsh and unhumanitarian. Human rights watch groups have found that groups of young men from Australia are often armed with knives and rocks while assaulting and robbing refugees on these islands. Many of these refugees and asylum seekers now refuse to leave the centers in fear for their own safety. Many of them claim that Australian authorities have made little to no effort in preventing these crimes and investigating the attacks made against them. Along with limited medical access, these refugees do not receive the adequate access to mental health services. Without adequate support and care for these asylum seekers, along with prolonged detention and exposure to violence, there has been a horrible impact on their overall well-being and human rights. When looking at human rights, we can see how these refugees and asylum seekers' basic claims and entitlements are being violated for simply coming to a different country. Human rights are essential for living a life full of dignity. Seeking asylum in Australia is not illegal, and it is a basic human right that everybody should be entitled to. All people are entitled to the protection of their human rights despite how they arrive in a country. These refugees have undergone violence, harassment, and threats from the Australia's people, and there hasn't been a considerable amount of effort to protect them. Despite the fact that they are coming from an outside country, Australia is failing to protect its refugees and asylum seekers, making this a human right issue and bringing conflict between Australia's refugees and the people of Australia. For the past several years, South Africa has undergone an HIV/AIDS crisis throughout their country. South Africa has the highest HIV and AIDS epidemic in the world, with the prevalence in its population at 13%, which is about 7.1 million people living throughout the country. These numbers are concerningly projected to increase over the next 5 years. The HIV/AIDS epidemic in South Africa is found primarily among adults between the ages of 20 and 40 years old, which are the post-productive years of an individual's life. Because of this, it plays a direct impact on the workforce and sharply influences the economy. South Africa's poor healthcare system has been a contributing factor in the spreading of HIV and AIDS and has brought on an epidemic that depletes the country's medical resources even further. The healthcare system in this country is overall too inadequate to handle the serious epidemic, and almost 75% of all doctors in the country practice for the private sector, and the poverty has made health insurance too expensive, leaving many untreated. For those people who are too inadequate to have access to the private healthcare sector, they turn to the state system for help, which has led to a great amount of tension between the people and South Africa's government, resulting in political negligence. Many point fingers at their government for taking too much time to respond to this epidemic. Development is a sustained increase in the standard of living and well-being of a level of a social organization. Sustainability, on the other hand, is the idea that development should meet the needs of present without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their needs. The HIV/AIDS epidemic through South Africa has affected all of its sectors. While its impacts on the healthcare and political area are most evident, HIV/AIDS also threatens and poses a risk to the country's food security, reduces the availability and quality of education, and also affects the country's working sectors and infrastructure. HIV and AIDS plays a great role in contributing to the lack of development in the country. As we can see, health has an overall large role in economic prosperity. Having good health is central to having a well-being of individuals and a country. Shortly after, the United States decided to fund troops, known as the Mujahideen, in Afghanistan to fight against the Soviets. In 1994, an extreme militant faction of the Mujahideen quickly integrated into a new group known as the Taliban. The Taliban was a revolutionary movement that focused on rebuilding the Islamic Empire, and they had a deep opposition of the Afghan tribal system. The Taliban gained much of their power in reaction to the civil war and had attracted much popular support in the initial post-Soviet era by promising the Afghan people that they would institute stability and rule of law after having years of ongoing conflict among rival groups. However, the Taliban implemented an extreme interpretation of Islam over Afghanistan, and also an extreme interpretation of the Sharia or Islamic law that upheld many Afghans and those of the Muslim world. Through the eyes of other nations, they had committed many human rights violations and posed security threats, bringing on conflict, especially against Afghan minority groups and women throughout the country. The Taliban's brand of Islamic fundamentalism was so extreme that it appeared to repel Islam's message of peace and tolerance. Today, the Taliban has high hopes to completely take over Afghanistan and influence the rest of the world by using fear from outside countries. Peace is often defined as both the absence of conflict and violence. Because Afghanistan is continuously facing the conflict and violent acts done by the Taliban, the people of Afghanistan live in fear every day and are forced to live under the violent rules and restrictions the Taliban has imposed. Over 111,000 people in Afghanistan have died from conflict caused by the Taliban. People who live there describe the most casual areas as war zones and claim that it is difficult to find peace in many places. For years, the Taliban has continued to pose an imminent threat not only to Afghanistan and its neighboring countries, but also to the United States, and has brought upon a regional and national security attention. The group has been able to establish a strong presence of power and violence, making it difficult for states to take measures to ensure safety and survival of Afghanistan's people. The security and safety of the country are very limited, and their launches of terrorist attacks spread violence into outside bordering countries, making other countries have an increasing concern for their own security.